Welcome everyone to the very first episode of the NR Webcast. I'm one half of your host, Rebol, and to my right we have, or left,
John Ryan. Thank you.
John Ryan, and this is our new, the NR Webcast, and basically what NR stands for is our Nerd Revolution Webcast. We're going to be talking about, different subjects like nerd-related stuff, obviously, comics, movies, video games, figures, just basically we're going to give you our ideas and opinions on things, what we think might happen in certain situations as far as comics and movies and whatnot. Just to give you guys a little insight, we have been, at least for the last 2 years, collecting strong, with our comics and whatnot. Comics have been stuff that we've been into for years, and it's just, I guess when you're growing up, you kind of lose touch with certain stuff that you like comics, and
basically just gets you back into the dance. Like it kind of reminds you what you once loved, and especially as an adult, you appreciate it a lot more now.
Absolutely, 'cause I mean, growing up, some of the stuff I'm sure, I know you, I know John liked, I know some of you viewers watched was Batman the Animated Series, X-Men the Animated Series, the Spider-Man show, all these things that inspired us, and without us even knowing, we were growing up, born into, as comic fans, and now that we're a little bit older and we can kind of appreciate the stories a little more, especially the darker tone ones like Batman and all that. Funny story, when we're younger, obviously we collected comics, but not as seriously. But I say about 2 years ago, I kind of remember it pretty nicely. It was right after, as a matter of fact, when Arkham City came out on the Xbox, and we played it, and the game was awesome. And there's all these stories I started hearing about Batman afterwards, and it's like, damn, I want more of that. And I'm like, I probably want to start reading some comics, And I remember walking into a drugstore next to my job on my break, just pick up a soda, and I will, mosey over to the magazine section and notice comics. I'm like, oh shit. So looking through the comics, I picked up an issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, and I was hooked. Boom, I was done right there. Went home, looked up my local comic shop, Capital Comics, Raleigh, North Carolina, and that is my haven. That is my home. You guys ever see Clerks? I just drop on my knees every time I walk in there. This is Nirvana. And I'm over like 600 comics strong, probably a little more than 600. John, I know you got a few as well,
A few. I don't know if you can see, but there's a white box, and there's one right there, and then there's one behind it. 3 boxes over 2 years of collecting, and thanks to you, because it was Arkham City that also led me to collect them too, because I wasn't familiar with people like Hush, and I was like, he seems like an interesting character, or even Azrael. Like, I've heard of him growing up, but I never actually got into him, so I was like, alright, let me get a few trade paperbacks, read about these characters. And I was reading nothing but Batman, and Rebel's trying to get me to reading into Marvel and DC, and I was like, I'm satisfied with what I'm reading now, I don't want to get too much into that, I don't think I have the time to. And then one thing would lead to another. I would expand my horizons, read about characters that I love from Marvel, like Spider-Man and Captain America, and especially in Gambit, my favorite X-Men. I would read about those characters, and then a couple of titles turned into a few, and then a bunch. And here I am 2 years later, I'm spending $40, bi-weekly, collecting all the titles that I love from both Marvel and DC, and I thought I would never really see myself in that kind of position, but you know what? It definitely is worth it. I love the stories that they're both putting out right now, and I also do look into, comics from like the 80s, 90s, and even much, much earlier, even before my time. I compare the differences, but I try not to say what's better and what's not, basically, I love what's out right now, or else I wouldn't be reading it. And that's pretty much where I stand, For DC, besides Batman, I love reading Aquaman. I was never really a big Aquaman fan growing up, but ever since the way he's portrayed in the New 52, I just love how they just gave him much more of a better edge towards his character. So I love reading about him and even Superman, especially after seeing Man of Steel. You know, definitely changed my perspective on the character in general. You know, and then you got to...
You know, like going back to what you were saying before, getting back into the whole comic scene and being a loyalist, basically, I was one of those people that's like, fuck Superman, he's boring, and, you know, he has a power for everything, he's overpowered, but man, this character, you can tell why he's lasted for generations and why he's a fan favorite. And it's definitely become one of my fan favorites, but, you know, if I had to pick my favorite hero of all time, it's Batman. Going back from the animated series to... I basically grew up with Batman in every capacity. I do have a top 5. But
Batman is almost everybody's favorite, and there's a problem with that.
You know, like...
Not a problem with that at all.
And it's just, you know, I just have a very special place in my heart for him. To me, he's... You know, a lot of people like to use relatable and all that, and I do believe, he is relatable, but man, he's a fantasy of somebody I would want to be, a perfectionist, you know, obviously a millionaire. But above all else, he takes everything seriously, and he's always working towards that one goal, no matter what that one goal is. And this is a character who's inspired me my whole life. Even when I wasn't heavy into comics, even when I was heavy into different things, he's somebody who, even though he's a comic character, I know a lot of people on the outside of the comic scene will look and be like, what are you talking about? But I've always looked up to him. He's somebody I idolized. I'm like, damn, that's somebody who can't do wrong. And that's one thing I love about comics, is these characters don't do wrong, in a sense. Like, yeah, there's stories where they might do something that conflicts certain interests and whatnot, but they don't change, you know, you don't have them talking shit. The benefit of them being comic characters is that they can't let you down. And for the most part, I haven't been let down. And, you know, with today's writers and everything, now's the perfect time to get into comics. If you guys will stumble upon the show, you guys are watching it, and you don't read a lot of comics, I would suggest picking up a few of them, checking out what's out there. It doesn't have to necessarily be DC and Marvel. You know, you have Image, Titan, Dynamite, Dark Horse, whatnot. You have a bunch out there, a bunch of different comics you guys can get into. Just stop by a local comic shop, check out what's going on. If you're in the New York area, you know, you got Midtown Comics, a freaking Nirvana for comics, every comic under the sun, and, you know, definitely support your local comic shops if you can.
I think that's the beauty, too, about being a comic fan, is that, you know, Marvel and DC are the main event, you know, publishers. I hate to put it that way, but that's how I look at it as well. But it feels so good when you look at other publishers, like you said, like Image and Dynamite and Dark Horse, and especially Dark Horse, you know. You know, one thing just leads to another, you know. All you got to do is, you know, like for Marvel and DC, you know the basics. Like, you know the basic characters to look into, but if you question, well, who do I look into? Like, what do I read in other publishers? You just have to just look into what kind of comics each of them put out, and whichever title has like a good plot towards it, you know, or whatever just suits you better, you know, look into it. And then before you know it, you're collecting one thing from another from that publisher. You know, I actually collected a couple of titles from Dark Horse. You know, I wasn't planning on it, but I did. Even Boundless Comics, I read Lady Death. You know, she was actually one of my favorite female characters to read. And she's a character that I knew growing up. I just, you know, I was young. I never paid any mind to it. But as you get older, you appreciate the content and the material that's involved. And I was like, man, this character is just something else. And you don't get me wrong. You know, her being busty and curvy and sexy has a lot to do with it. I'm not going to lie, all right? That is one of the main reasons why I love to read her. But her story is so compelling, and I didn't expect that. So again, you know, look into a comic that looks appealing, and, you know, either if you don't like it, you just move on, and that's it.
Yeah, and if you do, I think that's the main thing. Is one thing I've noticed, and I guess I just kind of never really thought about it, is you have different writers. Like, let's say you have a favorite writer in DC, they're probably writing for another company as well. So you kind of keep your eye out. Look at, like, all right, one writer I'm going to point out specifically as being one of my favorites is Gail Simone. I never thought I'd appreciate Batgirl, the character of Batgirl, so much. And, yeah, it did take the death of the family storyline to get into her because, Snyder wrote this great piece where, Joker comes back and he's basically not taking on just Batman, but he's trying to break the family apart because he thinks, in his twisted mind, Nightwing, Damian, Red Robin, Batgirl, they're all distracting Batman. They're making him weaker, and he's basically trying to make them separate and make Batman go back to his desperate times and lonely times, because that's when he's his most, furious, if that's a word. Ferocious, I guess, that's what I want to say. And with those tie-in books, I got to check out Gail Simone's Batgirl, and I've been hooked ever since. I haven't missed an issue since that Death of the Family storyline. And with that, then I noticed, hey, she's writing Red Sonja for Dynamite Comics. I know about Red Sonja, but I never really got into it. I never really thought about it twice. Saw Gail Simone's name on there, jumped right on it. And don't be afraid to branch out. I mean, I really enjoyed Red Sonja. And I'm more of a traditional comic fan in the sense where Marvel and DC, those are the ones that I initially followed, and those are the ones I liked. And I like superheroes, basically. But remember, if you're not just into superheroes, or if you're not into superheroes at all, but you like comics, there's a comic for everybody out there. So I highly suggest, man, just check out one of your comic shops and enjoy it. Look at the bevy of beauties that you could find in there. All these hidden gems and treasures that you never knew existed, just because you never really thought to look past superheroes and all that stuff, Comics is a great medium. It's a very visual medium.
It's amazing, too, how, when you got that mind frame where you look at all the other comic fans, let's say you're not a comic fan, and you look at everyone else of how they handle it, you're like, I don't want to be part of that crowd. It just looks like a silly crowd that I could have been a part of when I was much younger, but I'm past that. But, there's much more than to just looking up to these fictional characters. It's the way they're written. Like Rebel said, like Gail Simone is a real compelling writer. Like, there's her, there's Scott Snyder, there's Jeff Johns, especially Jeff Johns, you have a lot going on in all the titles that they write. It's not like they have the same format in all of the titles that they write in. Like, they're very different. So, for Gail Simone with Batgirl, it's much more different than the way she writes Red Sonja, And it's like Gail Simone is writing this, And that's the beauty of it. That's what makes a writer a great writer, is to change your material up and in all the different titles that you read. And even if you're not a comic fan, even just open up one comic can just change you forever. You could either take it or leave it, or you'd be like, okay, I want to get into the one. And that's what happened to me. And I don't regret it.
You will probably end up like us and having a full list of well over 20 books per month. But guys, we don't want to. Yeah, right. We don't want to. This is our introductory video. We want you guys, and this is just an example of different topics and stuff we'll be discussing. So if you like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, and hopefully stay tuned with us. We're going to have a lot of different topics to cover, and sit back, enjoy the ride, and we're always open to questions from the fans, from you guys. If you guys have any questions you want answered, personal, comic, video game, whatever. I mean, whatever kind of questions you guys have, send them in, and I'm Ed Rebel. This guy over here.
And I'm John Ryan.
And we will catch you next time on the NR Webcast, NR Comics Webcast.
All right. Thank you, guys.